Every day there are risks being run on the roads of Britain. The rapid transport of fuels, raw materials and industry's products is essential. Trucks and lorries carry highly flammable, corrosive and toxic substances. Accidents happen, possibly with catastrophic results. But how can the public and the drivers themselves be protected? How can the emergency services be helped? Hello. We're going to take a look at the answer to those questions of safety. It lies in 3 sets of regulations made under the Health and Safety at Work Act. They've been introduced by the Health and Safety Commission and the Department of Transport to replace a mounting pile of old-fashioned piecemeal legislation. The first of these, known by everyone as the Road Tanker Regulations, deals with all aspects of the transport of dangerous substances in road tankers and tank containers. It's been in force for some time. Then in 1984, wide-ranging controls were introduced to ensure that all dangerous substances were adequately packaged and labelled before they were put on vehicles by suppliers or others who wished to transport them. These were called the Classification, Packaging and Labelling of Dangerous Substances Regulations, or CPL for short. And now to complete the set, we have the third part, the Road Traffic, Carriage of Dangerous Substances in Packages, etc., Regulations 1986. Quite a mouthful, so it's not surprising they've already become known simply as the Package Goods Regulations, or PGR for short. They lay down the precautions that vehicle operators must take in order to transport dangerous substances safely, so they're directly related to CPL. The regulations are supported by lists of dangerous substances and down-to-earth guidance in the form of an approved code of practice. They apply to transport in everything from cars and vans to lorries that aren't already covered by the road tanker regulations. The controls imposed by PGR don't apply to small packages like these or to the least dangerous substances which are covered by the CPL regulations. But they do apply to most of the others when they're in drums with a capacity of 200 litres or more. And the regulations apply to the most dangerous substances, such as flammable gases or highly corrosive substances if they're in cylinders or containers with a capacity of 5 litres or more. What PGR means is new responsibilities for vehicle operators and drivers, and it'll change the way thousands of people do their jobs. But just who will it affect? How'll they respond? David Lomax has been getting the reactions of some of those who are most involved.
Whether it's packing, storage or transport, the new packaged goods regulations affect everyone. And that includes both the people who do the sending, or the consigners, and the people who do the carrying, like road haulage operators and their drivers. Before the regulations were drawn up, there were full consultations with the unions and the employers' organisations like the road haulage and freight transport associations. At the end of the chain, we have businesses like Durham Chemical Distributors. They have 70 years' experience in packing and distributing chemicals. They're quite familiar with the CPL regulations.
We've managed quite well. We're used to labelling and handling these materials, and there's no great problems. But obviously we've had to redesign labels to comply with the CPL regulations. We've now done this, and it's gone along quite nicely.
What difference will the new regulations make?
Well, we have a responsibility in dealing with contractors. We must make sure that they are aware of the dangers of the products that we're loading on their vehicles. And they themselves have a responsibility under law to ensure that their drivers are trained and that the packages that we load on their vehicles are correct, and that we give them the correct information on the products that we're loading onto the vehicles.
Hauliers too are affected. Forest Freight is one of the companies contracted to carry Durham Chemicals products.
Well, we have to liaise very closely with Durham Chemicals, who give us all the information about the particular chemicals that are on the vehicle. Our drivers, after that, have to deal with that situation. They also tell us which particular chemicals are and how to treat that particular chemical as well.
How does a driver get information about what sort of load he's carrying?
Well, we have to make sure that the driver is always provided with a Tremcard, which has all the details about that particular chemical on it. We have to make sure that he has that before he leaves with the goods on the vehicle.
What is a Tremcard?
It's a piece of paper or a card that has details of the hazards of that chemical and what to do in the case of an emergency. It also has phone numbers on there to contact if there is such an incident.
So what sort of difference will the regulations make to you?
Only that the drivers will have to be trained now, and also you cannot just put any driver on it because they have to know exactly what they're doing. It's not just a case now of driving the vehicle, it's a case of knowing what you're carrying and what to do with that sort of chemical.
So how do they know all this? How do they get the information?
Well, they are sent on approved courses to be taught what sort of things to do in an emergency and how to secure the load, etc. when they're out doing a delivery with these sort of chemicals. They have to make sure it's parked securely and safe so that it cannot be tampered with or that it's in a dangerous position.
So they're still responsible?
Oh yes, there's totally the responsibility of the driver now.
Durham Chemicals and Forest Freight are used to handling chemicals. But what about those firms whose business doesn't revolve around dangerous substances, but who only carry them for their own use, like builders? They too are affected by PGR. What sort of problems have the regulations caused?
None whatsoever. If you follow the regulations properly, you know exactly what you're doing. Just plain common sense. That's all.
So what sort of changes have you had to make because of the new regulations?
Oh, well, we carry a fire extinguisher in the cab now.
And information in the cab?
Well, we're now carrying the Tremcard, which gives you all the details, what substance we are carrying.
What sort of training do drivers get?
Well, first of all, they know the regulations and the rules that apply by. They also know how to handle a load properly to make sure it's not rolling around in the back of the cab, and also just made sure it's the vertical and they're strapped down perfectly and harnessed.
With flammable, toxic and corrosive substances, there's always a risk, whether on site or on the road. And the responsibility for enforcing the regulations lies with the Health and Safety Executive. Roadside checks carried out by the police and Department of Transport examiners look for particular problems which come with transporting dangerous substances.
Nothing at all. All the drums labelled up, are they?
Yeah.
Vehicle inspections always check the roadworthiness of a vehicle. But if it is carrying dangerous chemicals, its design and maintenance must also allow for the nature of its load. And there are other changes. The PGR regulations not only insist that information about the load is kept available, but that there mustn't be any written information in the vehicle which might mislead the emergency services. Bruce Sharp is one of the Health and Safety Executive Inspectors who's responsible for making sure the regulations are effective.
We're looking generally for compliance with the regulations. We're looking for the correct labelling of the vehicles, the training of the drivers, and the general safety precautions adopted by the operators in the transport of the substances.
What powers have you got to enforce the regulations?
We have powers of prohibition. We can prevent the vehicle proceeding any further till things are put right. We can also, of course, prosecute in the magistrates' court.
But the regulations don't just apply on the road?
They apply also at all stages of the journey, from the time the vehicle's loaded until the time it's unloaded.
So if you find something wrong here, what happens then?
Well, we can go back to the operator's premises. We can take action there. Sometimes, of course, the premises will be visited by local authority inspectors, and we have very good arrangements for liaison between ourselves, local authority inspectors, the police forces and the Department of Transport examiners.
Yeah, I've got methylene chloride, propyl alcohol.
Mixed loads of chemicals have their own dangers, and now they are clearly identifiable on the road.
Sorry? Methylene dichloride.
Tankers have to carry a single substance hazard warning panel like this, but other lorries carrying packaged goods now have to have an orange panel displayed at the front and the back of the vehicle because so many different lorries are carrying so many different varieties of dangerous substances these days. And this panel shows the emergency services that they should take extra care and shows them that a lorry is carrying more than 500 kilograms of dangerous substances. The regulations as a whole harmonise with the agreements on the international transport of dangerous substances which apply throughout Europe. But even when all the precautions have been diligently carried out and checked, they can't in themselves stop accidents involving vehicles carrying dangerous substances. When there is an incident, the fire service has to deal with it. They do not see the new PGR regulations as just another set of rules to get in the way of speedy emergency action. The head of the Operations Study Group at the Fire Services College is Peter Webb.
Well, we're very pleased to have them because they give us more information. What we need is information quickly and clearly. We want to know if a material is toxic, whether it's flammable. We want to know whether we need to clear the area. We want to know whether we need to stop the traffic. And so any information which is clear gives us a head start.
Are you the driver?
Yes, sir.
Right, can you tell me what you got on this load, please?
Yes, I've got.
Each vehicle will have to carry in the cab identity of the chemicals that are being carried. Also, the lorry drivers in the future will have to be trained in the action to take in case there's an incident involving their load, and they can give information to us when we get to the incident, and also give information to the public who are in the vicinity in case there's a problem to them.
So these new regulations, they're not just red tape getting in your way?
Certainly not, no. The CPL regulations, which went before, were very useful, have had some effect, but these new regulations will require all vehicles which are carrying a considerable quantity of toxic material or dangerous chemicals to have a placard. Therefore, we find it very useful.
The emergency services are always prepared for the worst. But nowadays, with PGR and the CPL regulations, the worst need not be quite so bad.
What we're talking about is common sense, and the new PGR and CPL regulations are no more than common sense codified. Nothing in them should cause problems for responsible employers or drivers. Everyone accepts that the regulations are necessary. Industry, operators, the emergency services, unions and individual drivers, because they make life simpler and help reduce that potentially terrifying risk run daily on the roads of Britain. In their new form, they're concise, they're supported by straightforwardly written guidance and codes, and they make sense. So it makes equal sense for you to get on familiar terms with them as fast as possible. With your help, the danger can be contained.